welcome to the Doofcast, a film and TV podcast from Doof Media. I am your host, Scott Daly, and joining me, as always, fresh off the boat with his $25 travel voucher and a vial of heroin, aka the America Starter Kit, it's Matt Freeman. How's it going today, Matt?
Oh, I'm just swelling with optimism, and I just know I'm going to get a head start of the American dream.
Yeah, that's definitely going to work out for you.
I don't know what you're talking about.
This week on the show, our series covering the Best Picture nominees for this year's Oscars continues with our 7th film in the series. We're going to be talking about the Academy Award nominated movie, The Brutalist. This is a 3.5-hour epic film. There's an intermission in it. Actually, Matt, I read the intermission when it was in theaters was 15 minutes. Mine was only a minute. So I guess they just cut that down for us home theater viewers.
Yeah, I suspect the idea is you can just pause it for however long, I guess.
Yeah.
But
yeah, we do have the power to just press the pause button, so we don't actually need an intermission. It did, though, provide me a great place to stop watching the movie for the day and then pick it up the following day.
Yeah, I used it similarly. It is convenient for a 3-hour and 20-minute movie.
Yeah, it's pretty long. Not quite as long as Avengers Endgame, though, which is a vastly more important film, I think.
That's historically more important, yeah.
So we're going to be talking all about The Brutalist, and then we're going to wrap up our episode with another episode of Severance. Matt, last week, episode 5, Trojan's Horse, came out, and we're going to talk about it just like we've been doing for the past month.
Perfect.
All right, let's get into it. Let's talk about this week's film, The Brutalist.
These are yours, yes?
Yes.
All of them?
Yes.
Tell me, why is an accomplished foreign architect shoveling coal here in Philadelphia?
I'm afraid it is not so simple. There was a war on, and yet many of the sites of my projects had survived. My buildings were devised to endure such erosion of shoreline.
Matt, what is this movie all about?
When a visionary architect and his wife flee post-war Europe in 1947 to rebuild their legacy and witness the birth of modern United States, their lives are changed forever by a mysterious, wealthy client.
IMDb can't even do grammar right.
No, that's... Yeah, I read it as written, by the way.
Yeah. This movie was written by Brady Corbet and Mona Fastvold. It was directed by Brady Corbet, and it stars Adrian Brody, Felicity Jones, and our guy, Guy Pearce. Man, I sure do love Guy Pearce.
Yeah. Guy Pearce was amazing in this, actually.
All of them were amazing, but yes, Guy Pearce was incredible.
Guy Pearce was different than I've ever seen him, actually. Like, I was honestly, this is weird because I know Guy Pearce quite well, but not like, I know Guy Pearce.
I know you're best friends with Guy Pearce.
Yeah,
I know.
I'm best friends with Guy Pearce. No, I know his face quite well, but I was like, is that Guy Pearce? It's not like there's prosthetics or something. It's just his face, and he has a mustache, I guess.
It's just his character from The Count of Monte Cristo, only, older.
And without a British accent.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
He's American. He's a good old Philadelphia steel
Wasp. Yeah.
Man. What did he do?
He's an industrialist.
Oh, yeah, he's a Van Buren.
Yeah.
Fill in the blank on that one. Yeah. So, Matt, what did you think of The Brutalist?
So the biggest compliment I can pay this movie is that when I saw that it was 3 hours and 20 minutes, I was like, oh, no. Oh, God. No. Oh, and then I watched it and I really liked it. So in other words,
that's a huge compliment.
I started out with the terrible attitude and it won me over. Because when you start a 3 hour and 20 minute movie, there's a big part of you that's like, why are they doing this? Why would they feel the need to make a movie be this long? I've seen movies that were literally less than half this length that still packed a narrative and an emotional punch. So if you're going to tell a 3 hour and 20 minute movie, you really have to make it worth my time. And then when it does that, you see why it's on the Academy Award nominees list, put it that way.
Yeah. I agree with that. I think this is, out of the movies we've covered so far, I think this would be probably classified as the most traditional Academy Award nominated film. Would you agree with that? Like this is a movie that feels like an Oscar movie more than just about any that we've covered, I think.
I agree. Yes, I mean,
Um,
if you honestly, it's closest to just being the most like Oppenheimer, like
yeah.
literally.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Yeah. It is huge, as you said. It is sweeping, it is epic, it is tragic, it is, I mean, it's a movie, honestly, that I was like kind of kicking myself for not actually seeing in the theater. Because I
Mhm.
just feel like this movie was uh projected on 70 millimeter, obviously not for us or for most people that watched it, because most theaters don't have a 70 millimeter projector. But it's huge. It's a huge cinemascope, massive movie. That's length and size is, I think, part of what it's doing and saying. But I agree with you. I really, really enjoyed this thing. I did have to split it amongst 2 days, not because I was like, I need a break from this movie, but just merely because I didn't have time to fit 3.5 hours at the end of my day. But I enjoyed just about every minute of this. I did kind of leave the film scratching my head a little bit, and then spent essentially all of today thinking about it. And I feel like I've kind of gotten my head around this movie a little bit. But was kind of not there were parts of it that made me feel stupid. I guess I'll say that.
Yeah, I think I might be in the same place as you. I think I enjoyed it as like a character journey, but I don't know that I can say that I understand what the movie's saying, and I don't know that can say I understand why they made specific narrative choices. Um, but that doesn't bother me. Like sometimes, even some of the movies we've discussed on this Oscars Prep 2025, I've been like, I don't get it, and I hope I can talk it out with you and get it
Hmm.
because like I don't think it worked. It's like no, I think this movie like works narratively and characterologically
Yeah.
in all of the ways that I really care about. Like setting that aside, yeah, I don't quite know what it was saying, but to me that kind of matters less. I think just for a movie like this, it is almost just about what the characters are going through and the humanity of it.
Yeah.
So I'm
To an
able to set
extent,
that
I agree
aside.
with that. Yeah.
But no, I mean, I think you're right that it is also saying something, obviously, and yeah, hopefully we can get our hands around that, just because that'll be fun.
Mhm. Yeah. And I mean, at its core, this is essentially a movie that is it is a man who has survived a concentration camp and flees to America, spends 10 years here, and then goes, "Eh, I'm good.
Uh
I'm
huh.
good. I'm gonna get out of here.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys." So yeah, I mean, it's kind of like a deconstruction or an inverse of the concept of the American dream, right? I think one of the most evocative images, and the one that you're seeing all over the posters, is the first shot of the Statue of Liberty as their boat touches down in Ellis Island, and it's the Statue of Liberty is upside down or sideways, right? We don't get to see the Statue of Liberty standing as this beacon; we see it inverted, which is, I don't know if you noticed at the end of the movie, though, the return to that kind of upside down image was the cross in the complex that he built was the wrong way. It was upside
Uh-huh.
down.
Yeah. 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 I mean, sort of straightforward symbolism of this is a, the actual reality of this is that it's a perversion or betrayal of the values that it purports to be selling.
Yeah.
What he finds in America is not opportunity, but rather a very closed culture that is only opening to people like him if they're willing to assimilate fully, which
Yep.
he is not. We see this in the form of his brother,
Hmm.
who
Changes his name, changes his religion. Yeah.
and
Gets rid of the accent.
marries a Catholic American woman, and
Hmm.
I thought that was interesting because the character's impression of the situation is like, oh, it was his Catholic wife who turned him against me, and my reading was like maybe that's even wishful thinking. I think the brother just wanted to assimilate completely, and having this thick accented um, brother lingering around was making that impossible for him. And so
Yeah.
the wife was, if anything, just an excuse, a justification to not that it didn't cause his brother suffering, but still a justification to kick his brother out of the house.
Yeah. I mean, the wife
Um,
certainly did not want him around, right? She lied about him and forced him out. But I think you're right. I mean, I think you could say that his brother looked at the situation and just said, and just made the choice that um that Laszlo was unable or unwilling to make. Just as like, if I'm gonna make it here, I need to become this place, because if I don't, this place will use me up and throw me out.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I
and so he makes that choice, and he is successful in that, right? Like
yeah.
he's running a successful business. He's doing all right. Um, but there is, I mean, I do think there's still definitely like a divide. Like I do think there's a part of me that says, like, no matter how much you do or how much you assimilate, you will always kind of be seen as the other.
Yeah.
That I think is still there for sure.
I think so. So one thing I noticed is every time Guy Pearce refers to his brother, he calls him, yeah, and your American brother said
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
And it's like, what a fantastically like almost Orwellian use of language, where it's like, he's not American because
Yeah.
he's Laszlo's brother. um, so by repeatedly emphasizing that he's your American brother, it's like what he's really saying is like your Americanized brother. That of course he's not actually American
Yeah.
because, but I don't say my American friend John because John is just John. He's obviously American.
Yeah.
It's your American brother because he's obviously not American.
Hmm.
I totally agree with you there.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the Felicity Jones character, his wife, that only enters the picture in the second half, I think it's really interesting how the movie frames her as well, because one of the first, of course, we see she's in a wheelchair from the famine. She's got osteoporosis. She's suffering, but she is almost similar to his brother, willing to kind of assimilate, or at least less stringent about it. Like, I loved that initial conversation where they try to pronounce her name, Elizabeth, right? And she's just like, you can call me Elizabeth, it's fine, whatever. And so she just seems much more willing, but then still is the one that eventually sees her situation for what it is, and is the one that decides we're getting out of here.
Yeah.
But I
Well,
do see her as trying more at the beginning than he was ever willing to.
I think she seems more hopeful. Also, she's just more obviously an Anglophile. Like she
Yeah.
learned English in college. She writes
Sure.
in English.
Yeah.
She went to England. Like as far as we can tell, this is his first exposure to the Anglophones, the Anglosphere.
Sure.
And yeah, you're totally right. Like she's kind of the spiritual guidance and core of the film in all
Mhm.
kinds of ways.
Yeah. I really love Felicity Jones. I feel like she gets like typecast in these historical drama movies. She always does these, but she's always really good in them. And I like that this wasn't, there's a version of this film, to make the Oppenheimer comparison, the version of the film where you have this brilliant artist in Adrian Brody's Laszlo character, and then you have his wife, right, who is this kind of like this angry wife left at home sighing and disappointed. And she is not that character, right? She is actively involved. She is clearly smart, and has her own agency in this, and is a true partner for him. And you can see why he was missing her so,
Yeah.
because of her, like, it's truly an equal partnership of a marriage where
Yeah.
um that like you completely understand why his life felt so incomplete and destroyed without her in it.
Yeah, he definitely behaves dishonorably multiple times, but like
Sure.
there is something
But she was there, so it didn't count. She said so.
yeah, right. That it's an interesting relationship.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to use that as a euphemism for like, oh, it's actually problematic. It's like it just strikes me as being deeply real and nuanced and
Yeah.
multidimensional and yes, flawed, but also kind of beautiful. Um,
Yeah. So
w-
see, here's an angle I want to present to you that I think might help better understand some of the stuff with this movie. So I mentioned this movie is written by Brady Corbet, who's also the director, and Mona Fastvold. They are partners.
uh-huh.
So they wrote this movie together. And so I think you could probably see a lot of their relationship in the two Toth characters.
Uh-huh.
and both being equal partners. And I just want to say, like, one of my big takeaways from this movie after I sat and thought with it, that there's a lot in this film about the patron artist relationship, right? That is the driving relationship between Guy Pearce's character and Adrian Brody's character. So I've decided in what might be the most boring interpretation possible, but I've decided that this is a movie about making movies, Matt. Um,
That's great.
I do see a little bit of this idea of, you know, the artistic vision of the director of a film trying to get a movie made that is the thing he sees, the thing he wants, the thing he wants as not just what he sees in his head, but wants to be this symbolic representation of things that are important to him, and him coming in conflict with the suits, with the producers who want something else, who want to save a buck here or there, who want to cut corners, and that I mean, it's such a fascinating core relationship, the whole patron artist relationship, because it's a relationship that's existed like since the dawn of time, because there's always got to be someone to foot the bill for any artistic endeavor, right?
Yeah.
And it's always been a relationship of equal parts cooperation and conflict, because like a patron doesn't go to an artist to give them money because they don't want to see what they have to do, right? And I believe, as challenging and awful as a character Guy Pearce's Harrison Van Buren is, he also, like, I believe him when he genuinely says, like, he recognizes the beauty in Laszlo's buildings, and he wants them to be created, and he wants him to achieve his certain vision. I believe him sincerely in that, but I also believe him is a businessman, and he's going to also succumb to the pressures of money, and I find this core relationship fascinating. I mean, I think Brady Corbet makes it clear what he thinks about this relationship with how he ends it with the patron raping the artist.
Right.
But it is pretty fascinating.
Yeah. Okay. So as you're going through that, I hadn't considered this reading at all, but as you're going through that, I'm realizing, like, well, you know, the patron artist relationship is quite rare these days. What we do have is the audience artist relationship, where
Sure.
in film, in novels, in many walks of art, what you have is the audience, and the audience kind of stands in for the Guy Pearce character, where they're fickle, they're emotional, they have all the power. You have to cater to them, but at the same time, you have your artistic vision, and it's this constant battle to try to do what you think is artistically important, while your audience is flailing around. And then I think the idea that, you know, the audience ends up raping the artist is probably metaphorically right there to be picked up. So
yeah, I like that. I mean, I do think, like, if we're going to do the filmmaking metaphor, we could say that, like, a producer or a studio could play in for the patron role. But I like your twist on the audience. I hadn't considered it from that perspective. I do like that.
I maybe I'm just thinking that because that seems to be a very culturally resonant concept right now, like just
Sure.
the concept of audience capture, and seeing people who are less like Laszlo, who just kind of become broken and totally beholden to their audience, and then
Yeah.
seeing people who are in conflict with their audience, like you just see it all the time these days, because you know, the many to many communication platforms really reveal these things that otherwise, you know, in the past maybe were kind of behind closed doors.
Yeah. And I think the story of this movie, like, fits in great with this narrative too, because this is the film that Brady Corbet and Mona Fastvold, like, spent 7 years from an initial idea to production, to get this movie made. It was a struggle. It was an argument. They struggled with studios. They struggled with insurers. I read somewhere that an insurance company would refuse to insure the movie because the script was too big. And so Brady Corbet just changed the margins on the paper, and so lost some pages, and it looked smaller, and so they insured it. Like, the battle that Laszlo has with Harrison and his son and the whole thing is the battle that Brady Corbet had to get this movie made. And I think that's fascinating, actually.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure he didn't set out when he wrote the movie to have this battle as part of making the movie, but that's what it ended up being. And I that I think gets us into the concept of brutalism, which is an architecture style that is heavily presented in this film. Laszlo is a brutalist. First of all, I want to say about that is I kept waiting for them to like not stop the movie, but like explain what brutalism is. Like if a person like I like not for me, Matt, I definitely 100% knew exactly what brutalism was the whole time.
You and I
I
are
didn't need
cultured.
that explanation at all. I'm doing it for the sake of other people, right? Yeah. So like I like the movie doesn't like if you didn't know brutalism was an architectural style, you would finish this movie and just be like, why'd they call it that?
Yeah. So it's an architectural style that emphasizes very stark looking buildings, very, very, very heavy on showing the structural elements, showing the raw concrete, a lot of right angles. Often brutalist buildings are thought of as being ugly.
Yeah.
I think a lot of brutalist buildings are ugly.
Yeah, I think that was like it's so weird that was my biggest struggle with this movie, and I guess ultimately like perhaps the thing, a testament to how good the movie is I think brutalism is ugly. I don't like it. Like when Guy Pearce is saying that he sees like the beauty in what Laszlo is doing, I'm like, really? I mean, the first time we see his completed library, like my reaction was like, I don't like that.
Yeah.
I don't like that library. And that chair does not look comfortable. I don't look like I'm going to, like, it doesn't feel cozy. It doesn't feel warm in there. It doesn't feel like a place I want to curl up and read a book. It looks cold and stark and uncomfortable. And that is brutalism. That's what it is.
Yeah. Brutalism, I think, was one of those things that became like a political flag at some point in the 20th century. And so it was more of a like, oh, you're very modern. Your sensibilities are very modern because you're into this very modern thing. And we all play the game of fashion where we pretend that we don't notice that it's actually ugly because like it's funny. You Google pictures of brutalist buildings, you can find a few that are nice. Or let me rephrase. I can find a few that I think look nice, but like the reason I think they look nice is that they don't look particularly brutalist. Is the truth. So that and that's fine. So like metaphorically though, the reason to make him a brutalist is that he has this mentality kind of not just toward his architecture, but toward everything, where he's just this uncompromising person who's all about like ripping away everything that's false and laying bare the fundamental truth of the thing, which architecturally speaking is like making your building out of concrete, and personally speaking is like trying to live with integrity and not necessarily succeeding at all times, but trying.
But I mean, look at him. Like he is brutalism. Just the way he looks. Like I think casting Adrian Brody in this was perfect because he's like tall, he's imposing. He's like one of the first lines that's said to him by the prostitute, which he, by the way, he just beelines to that prostitute. It's like, welcome to America. Here's some heroin. Go get a hooker. Like she says, your face is ugly. And he says, I know. Like he is, I also like you can kind of see him, the idea of like seeing the inner workings of the building. Like you can see the damage and the destruction and the pain and the suffering on him, right? Like he never hides it. There's never any masking done, as you can see it on him the entire time. Like he is a brutalist structure, Adrian Brody, in this movie.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, perfect actor, both in terms of portraying this character, but also I agree that he just kind of physically embodies this guy. Okay, I've been holding it in too long, Scott. I've been holding it in this whole conversation.
Okay,
we've got to talk about how this movie is an adaptation of The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand, because like 4 different things we've had in this conversation made me want to say this, but I was trying to hold it off. But like okay, so some mild spoilers for an 82-year-old novel. Okay,
is it that old? Holy fuck!
It is. So it's a novel about a man living in the 30s, who is an architect. His personality is that he's incredibly uncompromising. So he's an American. Okay, that's one difference from Laszlo. He's an American, incredibly uncompromising vision. The buildings that Rourke builds are described as, they're never described as being brutalist, but they're described as sort of having this no bullshit sensibility, actually they are described as having a lot of exposed building materials, and sort of like being simple and throwing all of the like classical architecture nonsense in the trash can because it's all just nonsense, and he's just about the form should suit the function. That's what Rourke is about. Not quite the same thing as Brutalism, but kind of cousin to it, I would say.
I mean, they're both definitely modern forms
Yeah.
of architecture, I think.
Modern
Yeah.
architecture. Modern architecture. Okay, additional element. He has extremely complex and lurid relationship with the love interest of the book, which is not. I don't want to say it's like super similar to the marriage depicted in this book, but it's also not altogether different from it. Where they're they're two people who they're sort of each of Rourke and Jesus
Laszlo.
Dominique. Sorry,
Oh, you're going back to the Fountainhead. Okay.
Rourke and Dominique are kind of they're the only two people in the world for each other, but also due to who they are, they take they because they can't see eye to eye on things. It takes them constant conflict and getting together and splitting up again and getting together and splitting up again, just because they're both these uncompromising people, but they're also the only other person that they could love, right? And then the same is kind of true for this movie, right? They're not on again off again in the same way, but we do have the whole first part where they're separated, and then when they're together, there is a lot of conflict, there's a lot of butting of heads, but also you get this sense, what you said before, where like you see why he was missing her, as she's like his ideal.
Yeah.
And obviously she loves him in a similarly intense way. So, okay, there's probably more I could even go into. There's the whole fact that the plot of the Fountainhead is probably the closest approximation is that you've got this architect and he even gets projects from wealthy benefactors, and then they try to screw him over and change the project, and his reaction is not good. So like, I'm not making this up, Scott. It's real close, but it's interesting the ways in which it's different. Where
Yeah.
while Ayn Rand herself was a Russian immigrant who loved America and loved the promise of America. Maybe she could quibble with the instantiation of America, but she loved the idea of America, and her characters are Americans. And in a sense, her books are like warnings about what America could be, like what America could fall into, but also the greatness it could aspire to. This is sort of a slant on that, where this is a Hungarian character who comes to America and is kind of rejected by America. So on the one hand, we had the author herself being foreign. In this case, we have the character being foreign and not really finding that acceptance. So I find that to be an interesting contradiction. I think what I really want to say. I know I've been talking for too long. What I really want to say is, like, I feel like they read the Fountainhead and they were like, there's like a core here that's really interesting.
Yeah.
But I disagree with like the thesis and like the vibe and the themes.
Yeah.
But I like the structure and I like the characters, and we're going to kind of do a riff, but it's going to be a riff that Ayn Rand would probably hate.
Oh, yeah. Ayn Rand would absolutely despise this because, I mean, essentially, like, and forgive me, it's been a long time since I've read The Fountainhead, and I didn't particularly like it when I read it. But the end of The Fountainhead, basically, Rourke wins in the end, right? Like, I'm pretty sure he isn't found guilty. He gets to build his building. He gets the girl. Like, it is this tome to like the success of the American dream, that one brilliant person can overcome all the obstacles in their way. Only in America could this happen, and he gets everything he wanted.
Yes, very much so.
That is definitely not this movie at all. This movie says quite the opposite, actually, which is interesting because ultimately Laszlo does go on to have a successful career that is obviously honored highly, right? The epilogue of the film shows a whole exhibit and ceremony celebrating his life in architecture, right? So it's not as if Laszlo does not succeed ultimately in the end. But the movie is essentially like he has to leave America to do that. Like, this is not the place for that. Yes, like eventually his building does get completed, but not like I don't actually know. I don't actually know if it happened like without like after. I'm assuming it's after he had already fled America. Um, the building just happens to get completed because I think it says it sits around unfinished till like 73 or something.
Yeah, I believe so. And then who knows like who finished it, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I'm right. I mean, I think the details of the ending are like beat for beat an interesting riff on the Fountainhead, because the Fountainhead ends with they change the building against the will of Rourke, the architect. He makes sure that there's no one on the premises, and then he blows up the building,
yeah,
and then they put him on trial for this, and then he wins because he's like, the contract said that they weren't going to change the building, and they did, so I blew it up. And then he gives a really good 75-page speech.
he gives a rousing speech about how incredible and amazing he is,
Yeah.
and everyone's like, "Wow,
Yeah.
you are."
Right. The jury stands up and claps, and he's let off. So, like, in contrast to this is very similar, where you've got the same element of he is working on the building, and kind of the whole time he's working on it, they're making little changes that he's fighting against. And then the ending, it's not that he blows up the building, but it's that in contrast, his wife sort of blows up the capitalist, as
Yeah.
it were.
Mhm.
And then the building is fine, but it does end with a big dramatic flourish of her confronting him in his
Yes.
home, which is a really interesting scene. Like I thought the son's reaction was particularly interesting, where it's way too aggressive to be anything other than like he knows something is wrong with his father.
Yeah.
It's not like shock as in like, this is so rude and beyond the pale, why are you doing this? It's shock as in like, we have to keep her from talking because she's going to reveal all of our secrets.
Yeah, I mean, I think the daughter just believes it immediately,
Mhm.
and the son, I agree, has such a over the top reaction to it that he's like, "Yep, yep." And then of course the father disappears, never to be found again. We don't actually know what happened to him, right?
The movie certainly doesn't tell us. I think maybe we're meant to assume that he kills himself, but it's not
Yeah.
clear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I was surprised by that ending as well. I didn't know what we were doing when we see her first walk up to the house. I didn't know, and there's a part of you, a jaded part of you, that goes like, once you realize what she's doing, what she's there to do, you're just kind of like, that's not going to accomplish anything. Like, they're not going to give a shit. It is kind of surprising and fascinating that it does almost exactly what she wants it to do.
Yeah. Right. I think maybe that's the thematic message there, is it's like these people are all surface. I like this a lot. Okay. Brutalism. Brutalism is about the substance is the style. Okay.
Mhm.
What you see is what you get. It's a concrete building. That's what it's made of. That's what it is. There is nothing to it besides what you see here. Same with
Yeah.
Laszlo. You see Laszlo. He looks harsh. He looks like he's made out of leather. You know,
Mhm.
he always speaks honestly. He speaks his mind almost to a fault. These people, in contrast, are classical architecture. They're cosseted. They're always wearing extremely nice, full suits, and have perfectly manicured hair
Mhm.
and mustache and everything. And everything about them is image and artifice.
Yeah.
And so her blowing up the building, in the parlance of this movie, is her just saying to them out loud the thing that you're not supposed to say, the truth, the the horrible truth. And that's all it takes, actually. I think that connects nicely.
I like this a lot. I like this a whole lot. Yeah, I agree with you. That feels very intentional.
Yeah.
Wow, I really like that. This is a great movie. It's
Yeah.
a really good movie. I love this movie now. I mean, I liked it a lot, and now I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
I
mean,
feel yeah.
I just like we were kind of talking about how we don't like brutalism. I don't know if you remember. Do you remember 2016? The ages and ages ago, that long ago time.
Uh-huh.
Because a thing happened when Trump took office in 2016, which is that he looked around Washington D.C. and said, "We're going to get rid of all these ugly buildings
Uh-huh.
and build new beautiful buildings." And
Uh-huh.
the ugly buildings he was talking about, Matt, where there's a lot of brutalist buildings in DC, right?
Yeah.
It's a very popular structure. I mean, it was also kind of cheap too, right? Like that's one of the ironic things about them, like driving him crazy with cost cutting stuff. Like I love that scene where he's like, "What do you mean materials? This concrete.
Yeah.
It's just concrete. What do you mean?" But they're nickel and diming it anyway, even though like just brutalism is like that's kind of the and this is research I've done on this architecture style, Matt, not stuff I just knew. So nobody think I'm a genius here, but like it arose in a post World War world, right? Where resources were scant, and also like the luxuriousness of older architecture seemed silly and pointless, right? So it is very much like in this movie, the thing that he builds, the community center that he builds, is as we're told by his niece at the end of the movie, a kind of recollection of living in the concentration camp for him. And so it is definitely an architecture style that's very much just like, we're sad.
Yeah.
The world is sad, and things are just gonna be have no flourish. It's just gonna be, as you said, function is form. The building is just gonna serve its purpose, and that's all we're gonna do with it, and that's it. And so there's a lot of DC buildings like that,
Yeah.
and Donald Trump did not like them. So it's real. Of course, he didn't actually do anything about it, because that's just who he is. But he made a big flourish of talking about it, and so it is interesting. I bring that up only to like to position this movie in the world that we live in right now, which I think it still fits in rather nicely.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. It is interesting. Like, I think it's genuinely interesting how the brutalist movement was what you said, maybe even more so than it sounded, where it was honestly the architects being like, the world is shit, and so people should admit that, and so their
Yeah.
buildings should reflect that reality. And it's like, hey man, why are you making me live in a building that reflects your opinion that the world is shit? Why don't, like, maybe you've just made the world be worse by making this building, actually.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, don't do that to people. Like, the worst is that they would make like public housing for the poor, and they would make it
Yes.
brutalist, and it's like,
Yes.
what? Like, you're like, this is not helping. What are you doing? Just as a I guess as a tangent, just for you specifically, I don't know if you remember the engineering building at the school that we used to go to together, but
Vaguely, yeah.
it was, I while we were talking, I was looking for some proof of this, and in fact, yeah, it's described as, if not fully brutalist, then at least semi-brutalist, because it's like, it was a super oppressive look. Like, it looked incredibly oppressive from the outside. It was like concrete and black glass, and then on the inside, it was, I always found it like suffocating on the inside. It's just like just horribly depressing to be in.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, they've actually just like totally redone that building since then, and it's like all airy and white and nice now.
I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, and I guess so. This is one thing I want to kind of talk about with the ultimate construction of the building he builds, right? Because we talk about brutalism as not just an architectural a style of flourish, but like of this idea of buildings are only functional. It is interesting to me that we learn what he's doing with this building that's supposed to be functional only is he's building these complicated secret passages that secretly link the four separate parts of the building together. And as we learn beautifully at the end of the movie, as like a metaphor for him linking up to his wife, even though they were separated in different camps. That doesn't feel brutalist to me, and I'm not an expert, but what do you think? Like the idea of having like flourish in that way of like secret passages, or even that like that room he had to like to collect the water seemed very, I don't know, maybe I just don't understand brutalism enough. But
I mean, I can't answer that question in a way that would be satisfying, because I don't think the building was very good. Like, and also, like, here's the thing, that the movie doesn't try to make the building look beautiful either.
No.
Like the movie often shoots it as like this dark, hellish maze.
Yeah.
And it's like the building is this albatross around his neck more than it is like a beautiful work of art that he's is
Mhm.
happy to be building. I mean, even from the beginning, it's like the way they sort of set out the scope of work for him is impossible. They're like, yeah, we want it to be a chapel and a gymnasium and spa and a library and he's like, what you're describing is 4 different buildings. And they're like, no, it has to be one building. He's like, okay, I'll make it one building that is 4 buildings. And it's like, this is a nightmare. Like, this
Yeah.
isn't going to be, this is this has failed from before it even started. This is a
Yeah.
contradiction, which maybe is the point, right? Maybe the point
Yeah.
is that this is an inherent contradiction that he is trapped inside and trapped by. And like the only way out is through, actually the only way out is to quit, which he does. He quits before
Yeah.
finishing it, right? So
Yeah, well, essentially, like the building, I think calling it an albatross is perfectly because with the metaphor that the movie hands to us at the very end of it being representative of his time in the concentration camps, the movie is his process, or the building is his processing of trauma, right?
Mhm.
It is his attempt to process the things that happened to him,
yeah.
and so yeah, like the struggles with it is all line up with just a human being struggles with witnessing some of the most horrible things that could ever happen to a person and seeing it all around him and seeing the world and like yeah I do find it interesting that he wants to make it as ugly and terrible as the concentration camps, but that desire to vault the ceilings, though, to be able to look up, there is some semblance of like hope built into that, or like,
Mhm.
but it's even so funny because like even when the movie shows us that as they're talking through it and the camera pans up to you're expecting to see like bright open windows, and it's just like little tiny slits in concrete with a little bit of light coming through. I mean, I guess ultimately that is what that is life and hope, right? Is just little slits in the in the cold concrete of life where that'll let a little bit of light in, and that is what we live for.
Yeah, I mean metaphorically, but like practically, it just looks like a mausoleum.
Yes. Yes. I mean, you're right. You're right.
So yeah, I mean, and so are you. It's just like, yeah, who would want to actually be in this space?
Mhm.
Um, it's
Can you
terrible.
like the chapel? Like I understand the marble is very beautiful. I get it, and the effect of the cross being reflected onto the marble altar is great. That's a neat effect. But can you imagine like going there to pray? It's
Right.
just like who
Right.
am I praying to here? Actually,
Yeah, in the same way that you can't really imagine reading, like relaxing and reading in that library
Yeah.
we got that we
Exactly.
saw.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. It's terrible.
It is. What a terrible style. I'm glad we've moved away from it.
Yeah. So it's funny. I was joking with you, like, because I stopped watch. I don't remember when the intermission is. But basically, I took a break after like an hour and a half in, maybe an hour and 40 minutes,
Mhm.
and that was basically when the whole movie up to that point had been him struggling. You had some ups and some downs, and then finally the industrialist that had screamed him out of the house previously shows up, and Guy Pearce is being very magnanimous and warm in this scene, and
Mhm.
he actually has a good excuse for being angry. He's like, my mother literally died that weekend, so I was kind of upset, so I'm sorry that I yelled at you. And you're like, oh, this guy's great, actually. Okay, we got a bad first impression, but he has a really good excuse for that. Who wouldn't lose their temper in that situation? And then I'm like, and then I joke to you like, all right, movie's over. Like he went through his trials and tribulations and struggles, but now he's been recognized for his talent. He's been given the contract to build the building, and his life will now flower and blossom. The end. And of course, I realized I was like less than halfway into the movie, but
Uh-huh.
like it is. I say this largely to say like it's a very structurally interesting movie where that what I just described to you might actually be like a lesser movie where it's just sort of the struggles of an architect trying to gain recognition.
Yeah.
But we get to that point, and then it becomes this kind of more intense and dynamic slog, right? Where like his wife arriving could be viewed as like, the triumphal end of the movie. His wife finally made it out of World War II ravaged Europe. This is wonderful. And instead, when his wife gets there, things only become more complicated.
Yeah, she's in a wheelchair. Their niece isn't speaking, um, and then things just continue to unravel.
Mm-hmm.
He's also addicted to heroin.
Yep.
Although I have to say,
Uh-huh.
kudos to Mr. Laszlo Toth for
Uh-huh.
being a fairly functioning heroin addict. Like, it's not every day you meet like a well-functioning heroin addict.
It's true. And look, this may just reveal more about my ignorance of history than anything else, but I'm like, was there really like a lot of heroin like in the 40s? And when was
I
this
don't
supposed
know.
to be? The 50s, early 50s?
I mean, I think he arrives in 47, um, which is when they give him the heroin, right? Like
Yeah.
that's what happens, right? Is he has a broken nose and face from fleeing Europe,
Uh-huh.
and he's in pain, and they give him heroin for the pain because, like, let's not forget what heroin was designed to do,
Right.
originally. And then we were like, oops, it's terribly addictive and kills you.
Yeah.
Oops, our bad.
Yeah.
And then he becomes addicted to it and continues to use it. I mean, there's that like very, very well timed like radio announcement in the middle of him walking through town about how people must turn to illegitimate sources to get this drug because it's very habit forming, which is like, thanks. Well timed movie. Thank you. Um, I don't know. I mean, I think it existed. So I don't know how historically accurate this movie is outside of World War II happened and the creation of Israel. Like, everything else, who knows? But
Yeah. It's interesting. The roles of I'm trying to remember, there were multiple like intercut radio broadcasts, and those are the only two I remember. Is basically somebody saying like Israel has been formed,
mhm.
and then also like the first ICBM has been tested by the US.
Yeah.
Um and I was trying to piece together like why, like what are we doing with, I guess part of what we're doing is just we're kind of getting indications of how much time is passing.
Yeah, I mean there's also one about the space race, I think. I think there's like that on the television or something, as we get further into the late 50s and 60s.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean I do think that serves to like Forrest Gump us through time, but I also like it's all about like the the wheel of progress in America while our characters continue to suffer under it, I guess you could argue. Like, look, we're all this incredible new technology,
Yeah.
but you're all still suffering.
Yeah, along those lines, we have the black character who is systematically mistreated and treated as inhuman, um, despite
Yeah.
actually, yeah, I guess. Uh, anyway, yeah, just like
He kicked the heroin though. Good for
yeah,
him. Pat
yeah,
him on the back.
he did,
And then Laszlo fired him because he's mean.
and then we never really got like a resolution there where he,
No. Yeah.
it's just that's it, that was it. He's a
Mhm.
jerk. Um,
I mean, let's talk about the heroin a little bit here because, like, I mean, I'm trying to think of like what's the metaphor here because obviously this is a thing like we talked about. He's given this drug, uh, it becomes habit forming. He almost kills his wife with it, which, by the way, that whole scene was excruciating for me
yeah,
because, like, the second I saw him realize she had no pills, I audibly said, "Oh no."
yeah,
And then I see him reach for a stash, and you're like, "Oh my god, he's gonna kill her." And then he doesn't, and then there's like a very passionate sex scene, and I'm like, "Oh, okay, she's not gonna die. She's just gonna be addicted to heroin now.
right.
Great."
That's what I thought.
Um, but then she ODs, and so like it was real. It was like a real big like emotional roller coaster because I didn't know what we were doing there.
Totally. I was expecting everything to go down the shitter in a much more dramatic way, like her to die, or yeah, like you said, her to get heroin addicted, or him to die of a heroin overdose.
Hmm.
But no, instead we get like, you and I are always complaining about the lack of sex in movies. So I want to applaud this movie. Good job. Um,
Lots of sex.
this
But
year,
like
yeah,
the sex in this movie is he can't get it up with the prostitute, and then HJ from his wife on the
uh huh,
first day she's back, like which he's struggling with it. He's struggling with that, HJ. Then very passionate heroin sex. And then rape.
Yeah, that's true. It's kind of a mixed statement, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So, but like ultimately, everybody important gets out of it alive. It's only Guy Pearce who may have died. So,
Yeah. No, I think it matters. Like, I think that's part, like, gets out of it alive because they leave, right?
Yeah.
But because they look at America and they say, no, thank you. And they get the hell out of there because it would have ultimately destroyed them, whether it's the heroin or the people or anything. I do think the heroin is this really interesting. We can maybe like construct a metaphor around the American dream with the heroin itself, right? This concept of like this drug that makes you feel really good, that makes you feel incredible, invincible, best you've ever felt, but also is destroying you and eating away at you. Like that. I mean, like you could look at his relationship with Van Buren as just another form of heroin, right?
Yeah.
This guy swoops in and gives him everything he wants. He's his benefactor. He the only person in this country that's seen his genius for what it is, and he's going to help him. He's going to give him this huge contract, this big money. Let him build whatever he wants to build, but ultimately it's poison. Underneath it all, it's poison.
Yeah, I love that. I think you're totally right. Were you saying to me earlier the Goethe quote, the none are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free?
Yes.
Which goes perfectly hand in hand with what you were just saying, where heroin makes you believe that you're free from the pain, but actually it's now you're just dependent on it.
Yep.
The wealthy patron makes you feel like you're free of the privations, but actually now he just has this hold over you and now you're just a slave.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the horrible thing about it is after he rapes Adrian Brody's character, the next day he just goes back to acting normal and he's just like, yep, this is our relationship, we're not going to talk about that.
Yep.
I get to do this to you if I want to.
Yeah. And Brody, like throughout the entire relationship, is just taking it because because he knows he wants this building, he wants to create, he's the artist, he's the filmmaker, this is his vision and he wants it, and this man is the path to it. So I'm just gonna sit there and take everything that he throws at me. Like I think you're so right that like when it's such a tricky relationship with Guy Pearce because he does have a valid excuse when he comes back to him later. But I think it is important and intentional that the first time we are introduced to him in the movie is when he's screaming mad at them. He's yelling racistly about the black man in his yard. Like our first impression of him is by design a negative one, and then he kind of wins us over. But we maybe subconsciously remember that stuff was always underneath, and that stuff continues to come up again. Like, man, the conversation at the table when he insults Laszlo's accent and like throws the coin at him, and then is like, I was just kidding, man, give me back the coin. And it's like, oh man, fuck you.
Yeah.
And like you can see Adrian Brody does such a good job. You can see the hatred boiling up on him. He hates this man.
Yeah.
But he's his meal ticket. There's nothing he can do.
And he did it in front of his wife. I think that's an interesting moment where the guy hasn't really mistreated him up to this point. It's almost like, or unless I missed something, I felt like that was a watershed moment in the relationship where it's like, he's proving that he can get away with humiliating him. While up to this point, you've basically been convinced that he's just like this magnanimous, lover of the arts.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are probably like little microaggressions throughout, that he's kind of othering him and treating him not as his equal. But yeah, I think you're right. This was a moment of, Laszlo now has everything. And I think it does stem from a place of jealousy, right?
Yeah.
Where like he says specifically that he's jealous of Laszlo's talent. And so not only does Laszlo have talent, but now he's got his wife back, he's got his niece back, like his life is coming together and he's getting to his dream project. His life is coming together in this very specific way. And that's when Harrison's ire really starts to come out, because
yeah,
he's incredibly jealous of everything this man has.
I think honestly, he's jealous of his wife too. Like
Yeah,
I feel like the relationship really sours the moment his wife shows up. And then there are specific scenes where, Harrison like picks up his wife and niece in the car, sort of on a pretext, I think, so that he can like spend time with her.
Yeah,
Maybe he has it in his head that he's going to seduce her. Who knows?
yeah, maybe.
Like that was actually like, because of how like horribly dreadful everything is shot, you're sort of always expecting everything to turn terribly wrong at any moment. So
Yes,
when he
yeah.
picked him up in the car, I was like, oh no, he's going to seduce Adrian Brody's wife here. And that doesn't happen because she's like a perfect angel. But but definitely you see like he's enamored with her. He thinks she's like so witty and beautiful, and the fact that Laszlo is the one who has her is just maddening to him, I think.
Yeah, this idea, I wonder if there was like a vision in Harrison's head of who this woman was, right? He sees this incredibly talented artistic man who creates these beautiful, I'm putting that in quotes, architectural structures, has more skill than Harrison could ever have at this particular thing. Um, and so maybe he sees him as, oh, he's got like a meek wife. Like this is a not special woman, a not powerful woman, just a kind of silent, ugly, you know, like just at least he doesn't have that, right? And then she shows up and she's in a wheelchair, so maybe briefly he's like, ah, yes, look at that. But then she opens her mouth and she's intelligent and strong and fierce and skilled and talented in her own right, a writer, and it's like, this motherfucker has everything. He has everything. And yeah, that's, I think you're so right there. He wants it all.
Right.
Like he even play like the idea of like, you can commute to work with me in the morning if you take this job in New York. Like it makes her dependent on him as well, just like Adrian Brody is. But then they can almost play house, where they're just going to share a car to go into the city each morning.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Yeah, he definitely covets this guy's life in every way.
Mhm.
Which, I think we're meant to recognize the irony of that. That being that Adrian Brody's character is a literal Holocaust survivor,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so is his wife, and they've both suffered immeasurably.
Mhm.
And yet, this American, incredibly wealthy man has
Yeah.
the gall to be envious of them, which, obviously the movie's saying a lot of things about America. I think it generalizes to saying a lot of things about humans, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Where you can be fortunate in every possible way and still have tremendous envy if you haven't had the specific flavor of success or even just love that you feel like
Yeah.
you should have gotten or should have deserved. I thought the interlude with his story about his mom was great. Just another knocking it out of the park moment from Guy Pearce, where he's telling this. It's literally just him telling a fairly lengthy story to Laszlo about a time when his mother's parents, who had basically disowned his mother,
Mhm.
were asking for money, and he did this incredibly vindictive thing where he left them with a $25,000 check, but he didn't sign it. And then when they ran outside to tell him he hadn't signed it, he's like, "Yeah, I didn't sign it because I hate you." and also you didn't react with appropriate grace and gratitude when I gave it to you. So
Yeah.
I'll give you $500 though. and at the time you still kind of like his character, so you're like, that's kind of psychotic, but maybe they, I can see why you did. Within the frame of this story, I can see why you did that. You love your mom. They treated your mom terribly.
Yeah.
It's harsh but fair, right? But then you kind of just realize, like, no, this guy's just a dick. He's just,
Well, and he's telling it to Brody, essentially to be like, like, appreciate everything I'm giving you, like, or else, essentially, right? Like, that's the underpinning of the story, is this idea of like, if I judge you being improperly unappreciative of everything I provided to you, I will take it all away. And I mean, that's essentially just accurate, right? That is a part of his ownership of him. Yeah. Uh,
True.
what a wonderful character Guy Pearce is. I mean, I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna go back to the Count of Monte Cristo again, Matt, because a line from that movie is because you're the son of a clerk and I'm not supposed to want to be you.
Yes. Oh
Guy
my
Pearce
God.
has come full circle.
That's why they cast him. It's perfect.
Yeah, man, I adore this movie. I really do.
Yeah. Yeah, me
Anything else
too.
you wanted to say about The Brutalist? I feel like only spending an hour on a 3.5 hour movie is unfair, but I think we did it justice.
Yeah, our normal standard would be to spend at least 3.5 hours on it, but
Yeah.
no, I agree. I think we did it justice. We got to talk about the stuff we enjoyed, why it was good, and then also I feel like we might have cracked the code on some of the questions that we walked into this conversation with. So success.
I would not be surprised if this one ends up taking Best Picture. I don't think it will, but I think it could. I feel like Adrian Brody's probably going to win Best Actor for this.
I can't currently think of who else would take Best Actor.
So here's who he's up against. He's up against Ray Fiennes in Conclave. He's up against Coleman Domingo in Sing Sing, a movie that we will not watch because I really want to see Sing Sing. I hear it's amazing, but it did not get into the so I'm not allowed to watch it because it's not a Best Picture nominee.
Right.
He's also up against Sebastian Stan in The Apprentice, who plays Donald Trump in The Apprentice.
Okay.
That was a surprising nomination. I think it was a post Trump won nomination. Like, oh fuck. I guess we're ready to see someone play Donald Trump again. Like there was when that movie came out, like it basically did nothing, and it was before the election, and I think people were just like, I don't want to talk about Donald Trump anymore, and I don't want to watch anything that has Donald Trump in it anymore. And then he won, and everyone was like, I guess we're gonna have to talk about Donald Trump more, so maybe we should give this movie another shot. And it really picked up steam from there.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
And the other one is Timothy Chalamet, who is Bob Dylan in A Complete Unknown, which will be the movie we're talking about next week. So I think Timmy has maybe the best shot to go against Adrian Brody here. He's running a very successful campaign. He's very well liked, and he's pretty good in that movie. I've seen that movie already. I know you haven't yet, but we'll talk about it next week. But so yeah, I mean, I think Brody could take it for sure.
He could take it. Let's just make sure it's not Halle Berry presenting it this time, and everything will be fine.
As far as I know, Felicity Jones is nominated for this as well. I'm not sure how that's going to go. She's up against Zoe Saldana and Emilia Perez, who might still win despite the controversies around that movie, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
I do think Brady Corbet has a chance to win for Best Directing here. I think that is very possible, but they might decide to anoint Sean Baker. Like if Honora wins Best Picture, I think it's probably going to win Best Director as well. And I guess the same is probably true for The Brutalist. But we could get some weird shit. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm currently rooting for this movie. If for those keeping notes, I think this is really good.
Yeah, I enjoy this movie a whole lot. It's definitely long, and my wife found it slow. She said, but I think this is a movie specifically made for us. So it's no wonder we really liked it.
Yeah, I mean, it was slow, but it earned it, I think.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah. All right, that is The Brutalist. As I mentioned already, A Complete Unknown will be next week's film. This will actually be the last one we do before the Oscars, Matt. The Oscars are not this coming Sunday, but next Sunday. And we will not finish in time, unfortunately. So we're going to have to watch one more film after the Oscars, which is I'm Still Here, the most surprising entry in the Oscars this year. I'm okay with that. It was just kind of the way it worked. I don't actually even know when I'm Still Here will be available for us to watch. It might not even be the week after the Oscars, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll get to it eventually.
For sure. But next week, Bob Dylan. Can't wait.
All right.
Doof.
Okay, Matt. It's Severance time. Are you ready?
I am.
Trojan's Horse. Season 2, Episode 5. I loved this episode. I
All right.
absolutely loved it. I liked it more than Episode 4.
Okay, that's good. I didn't like it more than episode 4, but that's not because I'm like I hate this episode. That's because I just loved episode 4.
Sure, that's
Um,
fair. Yeah.
yeah, tell me your feelings and thoughts about Trojan's horse.
I was just so into all of the really complicated character work that's going on with Milchek and with Mark. I think what the show is doing with Mark like really really fascinated me this time around because on both sides of the Mark, right? On both Mark Scout and Mark S. Like, we go through the whole funeral thing, and Mark S is very seemingly unconcerned and incompassionate towards Irving, right? Very
Right.
surprisingly so, surprising everyone that he doesn't seem to care. And I love that actually because a lot of people have these really complicated theories about why that is, but I think it's really simple is that he's just kind of fucked in the head right now.
Uh-huh.
Like he's just had his entire world torn apart. This woman that he thought he was in love with was not really that woman, and so there's the embarrassment and the guilt of not knowing that. And also at the same time, it means that everything he thought he was doing, all his plans, and he kind of says this part, all his plans, all his scheming, they knew about it the entire time. And so he's actually no closer to achieving anything he wants. And then, yeah, also his friend died. And
Yeah.
so he's just totally just messed up in the head. And also, oh, by the way, at the same time, he's reintegrating slowly. Which I think
Right.
the movie or the show handles that masterfully, Matt, because I don't know about you. At the very end of the episode, when Milchek gets in the elevator and he says something to the effect of like, what does he say? He makes a joke.
Yeah. He makes a classic Mark sarcastic, sardonic joke.
But it was a Mark Scout joke.
Yeah.
Like
I agree.
And there's a lot of people that like I read people say like, oh, does that mean that's Mark Scout and now he's pretending? And I was like, no, it's not. It's just the two sides of them are merging. Actually, that's what's happening over the course of the episode.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I love that moment that you're talking about because it did feel ever so slightly out of character for him. Yeah,
but it all makes sense with everything he's been dealing with.
Yeah, totally. And just also remember, on top of all this, he knows like 5 people, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so one of them just died, and one of them turned out to be a traitor. And as he says, he can't actually trust that she's not currently Helena again. Like, there's it is interesting. I think one of my favorite things about this episode is that as soon as we see Helly again, I was like, how did I ever think that was Helly? Like,
she's so different, right? Oh my god,
she walks totally differently. Like, Helly has this almost like animal, like she walks like she's a child in a Brothers Grimm fairy tale in the woods who thinks that there's going to be a wolf around the corner. Like, that's the way Helly moves, and the way Helena moves is she just moves like a person. She just moves normal, and it should have been immediately evident, but it only becomes evident when you see Helly come back, and you're like, oh yeah, that's always how Helly walked. I remember that now. It's wild, and it's perfect, right? I am so impressed by Britt Lauer's performance here.
Yes, she's so good, man.
We could just go through every scene and say how awesome it was.
Okay, let's do it.
So, I think last conversation, I was like, oh, it's a shame that John Turturro is out of the show. And you were like, no, I don't think so. And of course, we get another scene. Not only does it have John Turturro, it has John Turturro opposite the other guy. Christopher Walken, and which is the dynamic that we all wanted to see, except now they're both playing totally different characters.
Yeah.
And they have sort of a meet cute.
So, okay, you have to refresh my memory on this from season 1. So doesn't Audi Irving know who Bert is? Like, how did Irving B know where Bert's house was? Didn't he find where his house is located by looking through his Audi's shit?
Well, so this is all headcanon, right? My headcanon is Irving B has lists and maps and he knows names, but that doesn't mean he like knows who who Bert is. Like
Okay.
that he doesn't mean he's met him. So
Sure. Okay.
so Irv just sees the name and sees the map and is like, that's Bert. I'm going to go see Bert. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they've ever met before. But
Okay, that's fair.
It likely does mean that he knows Bert's name and he knows the significance of, or he suspects the significance of this.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I that makes sense. I was creating this complex conspiracy theory about like, why is Irving pretending like he doesn't know exactly who Bert is? But no, I think you're onto something there.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're gonna get a dinner between him and Bert's husband Fields, which I don't know. Like I saw some people speculating on who Fields is. We already know who Fields is played by. I don't know if you remember this. We've seen him before.
Yeah.
He's played by Denethor in Lord of the Rings. Yeah, what is that guy's name?
I don't know that guy's name.
That's who plays Fields.
Wow.
John Noble?
Yeah, that sounds right to me.
Yeah.
I didn't recognize him without his hair and his cherry tomato.
Like, yeah, I mean that's the big question. Is he gonna have tomatoes at
I hope so.
At dinner? I can't wait to find out. So yeah, we already know who that actor is. So there's not going to be like a shock. I saw some people were like, "What if Milchick is Fields? Wouldn't that be a twist?" It's like, no, we know who Fields is.
Yeah.
Fields is. So I'm really looking forward to that scene, though. I think that's going to be excellent. And yeah, I'm glad we still get John Turturro in this story for sure.
Yeah.
But so can we talk about Audi Mark a little bit?
Sure.
And whatever the fuck that shit in the fridge he's drinking is, which props to the prop department for making it the most disgusting looking thing ever.
Looks super gross.
It looks so gross.
And part of it is just how good a job he sells when he tries to drink it, and it's almost gags or does gag.
It looks like a soup. What kind of soup? Oh, okay. I'm looking at a picture. It looks like egg drop soup. That's what it is. Ugh.
Yeah. Well, I like egg drop soup, but yeah, it looks gross.
Yeah, but not in a cold in a canister in your fridge.
Probably just is egg drop soup.
Yeah, so I think, by the way, we see this in the opening credits. We see this that like the opening credits apparently have been a clue to everything that's going to happen in the season. And I think Ben Stiller came out and said, like, as you continue to watch the season, things that are happening in the opening credits will make more sense to you. He spills some of this concoction in the opening credits, and that's what this is. So,
all right.
Yeah.
I continue to appreciate the pacing and clip that this season is keeping. He started the reintegration an episode ago, basically.
Yeah.
2 episodes ago, I guess you could say. And we're already like well on our way toward reintegration, whatever that's going to look like for him.
It's kind of wild though. So, I mean, this is part of the reason why I'm like just really in love with what the show is doing with Mark S right now, because all this shit's happening to Mark S and reintegration is happening at the same time, but he doesn't know that reintegration is happening.
Yeah.
Like when Mark Scout at the very end of the episode goes on that weird trip where he ends up in a vision of the severed floor and sees Miss Casey, at least for that character, he can be like, oh, this is probably a memory from my innie and reintegration is happening. But like when weird stuff starts happening to Mark S, he has no context for that. He doesn't know why that's happening.
Right.
So it's got to be extra torturous for him.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, there's a lot of anxiety around this. I feel like we might have talked about this before, but our frame of reference for reintegration is Petey, who died of it. And it was incredibly like terrifying for him leading up to his death. So it's just this awful, like, oh my God, Mark, it says a lot about his character that he just immediately said yes when she told him that his wife was on the severed floor. And that's how desperate he is. But like, as far as he knows, he's just taking her on her word that it's safer now. And it's actually kind of funny when you think about it, because you're like, how would she know that it's safer now? She's not tested it on anyone except the one guy who it killed.
Yeah.
So really, it's just like he kind of knows. I think that he's putting himself at a huge risk, and so do we. So we're worried on his behalf. We really don't want him to to die horribly like that.
Yeah. I think all that's really, really great, and I'm really, really into it. It's so fun. I'm enjoying the hell out of it. Um, let's talk about Helly and Helena briefly here.
Yeah.
So Helly first. I just want to remind everyone, Helly's life in the past however many days has been insane.
Yeah.
So first of all, like from the end of episode the season finale of season 1 to now, how long has Helly lived?
I mean,
Like,
she just woke up for the first time in this episode.
right.
Yeah.
So she spent like half an hour in the body of an Egan, realizing who she was. Then,
At the very end of last episode, I should say.
yeah. So she like, and then gives this great speech, or is starting to give this great speech about how they're lying to us down there. Then the overtime protocol gets turned off. Doesn't she get tackled? I think she gets tackled.
She gets tackled.
Yeah. Then she wakes up in a river,
Uh-huh.
like drowning in a river, a freezing cold river.
Right.
And then who knows how long it takes them to like turn everything off after that. But then she wakes up again, back down on the severed floor to a child sitting on a bench looking at her.
Yeah.
What a fucking life, man. Holy shit.
Yeah. Right. And then it was actually quite sad to me. Like, I genuinely felt sad that like now she saw Irving for like, 5 seconds, and now Irving is gone and dead as far as she's concerned. And Mark, who her last experience with Mark was basically this kiss that hinted at the promise of future romance. Now he won't even talk to her. He's treating her terribly.
Yeah.
Which is, again, it's funny. Part of me wants to say this is classic Mark Scout behavior, but also it's just like, well, this is kind of just the way this person, Mark, behaves when things go bad. Is he just kind of turns into an asshole. I think that's been true of both Marks, actually. They become very shut down and keeping people at arm's length. So he's treating her terribly, and no one will explain to her what's going on. So yeah, I just feel really bad for her right now.
Yeah, I do too. It's awful. You like, she's just so confused, and no one's talking to her and making her understand. It's pretty brutal.
Yeah. And then,
all right, Milchek.
Yep.
Milchek. The the performance review. I think Milchek has to be one of my favorite characters in the show. Like, not like by far. I'm really, really into what they're doing with him. A desperate attempt to try to check to see if he has an ally in Natalie before his performance review was incredible. And even though it's kind of sort of a repeat of, like, I guess one could argue that the scene in which they had that facial expression moment communicated the exact same thing the words communicate. I like it as like, this is a progression path for Milchek. And I'm fully convinced that Milchek is a guy who was just kind of completely indoctrinated and bought into all of this stuff from the beginning. Like, he believes it all. He sincerely believes everything he's saying. He sincerely believes everything Kier and all this stuff. And over time, it's been like stripping away at him, right? Like, just the idea that Miss what's her name? Why can't I remember names? Cobell, thank you. That Miss Cobell, like when he says at the beginning of, as much as they're bullshitting the innies, when he says in the first episode of the season that like he can't believe they allowed someone like that down here, I think he means it. I think he legitimately means it. And I think we see him as desperately trying to not be like her, to not be that type of person, to not be cruel, to not be Cobellish. And then by the end of the episode, he's kind of being forced to be more like Cobell. And I think we're going to see a dramatic turnaround from this guy at some point. I think it's going to be the cult member that has the truth kind of forced into their eyes. And it's going to be interesting to see how he reacts to that.
Yeah, I think a lot stands to be recontextualized when we eventually understand why Lumen thinks they're doing this.
Yeah.
Like, it was really interesting in this episode when, in his performance review, they said something along the lines of, once Mark S finishes the data refinement of this particular folder on his computer, this will be like the greatest thing that has ever happened.
Mhm.
And even just by being his manager, you will be bathed in reflected glory. I don't remember what the exact language is, but the point is, it's like, this is an incredibly consequential thing that's happening. And we don't know if it's like sci-fi or magical or supernatural or even just cult bullshit that's totally made up, but they all believe
Mhm.
it, including
Yeah.
Milchick. So the nature of this thing, I feel like that's, when we understand it, that could help us understand this character more. That this is one of those places where it actually matters what's in the mystery box, because it helps us understand why this guy is the way he is, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I love it. I think it kind of really starting with the delivering of the blackfaceified Kier artwork, I think was just great. Because did I mention this last week? I can't remember if I mentioned this last week, but apparently the actor who plays Milchick, one of the first questions when he was preparing for the role that he asked Ben Stiller and the creative team was, "Does Milchick know he's black?" And that I think was meant not in like, is he able to look at the color of his skin, but does he understand what being a black man like means,
Uh-huh.
like culturally. And I don't know if we ever, like, he told that story, I don't know if we ever necessarily got the direct answer to that question, but I do think it like helps us see his reaction to the stuff, because it's clear to me that he does, right?
Right.
He does understand that, and this attempt at like, don't you want to see Kier in your image? So we're just gonna recontextualize this and say, yeah, of course Kier can be black too.
Yeah.
Really, just like it is the first crack in the facade of Milchick.
Yeah, exactly. That was the first time we saw him just sort of reject. And then, since his behavior in this episode, aside from having the performance review, there's also the moment where he allows them to have the funeral, and
Yeah.
the child, I forget
Miss
her name,
Huang.
Miss Wong is like, you're not supposed to let them have a funeral unless someone actually dies on the severed floor.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, the truth is, he doesn't really have a good like Lumen approved justification for this. He's like, they see him as a person, and maybe Milchick kind of sees him as a person, actually.
Yeah.
Like Milchick empathizes with them. Honestly, I don't know, but maybe I'm totally off base. Maybe other people read this differently, but my reading is like, Milchick isn't Mark S's number one fan, but he sees him as a person.
Yeah, which is
and
different from a lot of the other Lumen people, for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think him letting them do that, and of course he makes the tragic mistake of not letting Miss Huang play her instrument, which that's going to end up being his worst mistake. But I mean, it's really interesting because we leave him at the end of the episode do like close talking with Adam Scott with Mark S in the elevator. Like basically the impact of the performance review was not yet that Milchick is like has the cult of Egan has been torn away from his eyes and he's a good guy now. No, that's not how this is going to work. He's now going to double down on cruelty, and that is represented by him walking into the elevator and saying, "Does Helly S know you fucked her outie on the Ortbo?" Which is such a great moment.
Yes, it's a great, I mean, part of why it's a great moment and a great like kind of episode ender, although it's not really an episode ender, but a great closing moment, is that that's out of character for him to get in the guy's face and really speak to him as a human, antagonistically, yes, but as a human, not as a manager, not as a corporate mouthpiece, but the phrasing, the body language, everything about it is man to man rather than like Milchick, the supervisor, to Mark the innie.
Yeah.
It's great.
I agree. Oh gosh, what else? What else to talk about, Matt? I guess we should talk about Helena a little bit. So we said last week that we really do think Helena um, feels as much of a prisoner to Lumen as anyone else does, right? As her
Mhm.
innie does. And we see her in this episode. I think this is really, really interesting because one of the things we see her say is that she says they're animals, right? Like that reflects, I think, the earlier quote she said, well, we know as Helena is that like um they're not worth anything, which she was talking about the innies at the time. But I just feel like this is more Helena bullshit, man. So she does this very clever thing where they're like, you have to go back down there again because Marquez won't work without you. And she's like, fine, I'll just go down as me again. And she plays it off as it's not something she wants to do, but she's going to do it. And I think she wants to. Like,
Yeah.
I just think she wants to again.
I agree. Yeah. I think I think she's full of contradictions. I don't know that I'm totally sold on the idea that she doesn't kind of believe that they're fetid moppets. But maybe again, there's a schism in her. It's interesting because, you know, the whole show, the theme is a theme of duality and twinning and severing. But
Yeah.
like Helena herself, setting aside the fact that she's literally severed, she's also sort of schizoid herself, where she plays two roles. There's kind of two people already inside her even before she was severed. There's the goody two shoes Lumen representative, and then there's the person who wants to escape from that. So I think maybe there's even doublethink there. I'm big on doublethink this week.
No, you are, and I think you're right. I think you're right for sure. Okay.
Yeah.
There's one more thing I want to talk to you about.
Okay, there's Dylan.
Oh, we have to talk about Dylan.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll finish on the other thing I want to talk about.
Okay.
Let's go to Dylan. Dylan is great as always in this episode. I love him so much. I love his eulogy.
Yeah.
He put the dick in contradiction.
Yeah.
He's in like he's like fucking done, man. He doesn't give a fuck. And like we see him in don't give a fuck mode, but we also see the beginnings of back to revolution mode when as we inadvertently predicted last week, there is a message hidden behind the hang in there sign in the break room.
Yeah. Yep, and it is a map, or what serves as a map. It's a series of directions to
to the
elevator.
The elevator, yeah.
Although interestingly, it's just like left, right, which it's like, well, from where is this from?
I think it says from O&D.
Oh, okay.
I think that's what it says, yeah.
Which makes sense because this would have been written down by the woman who works at O&D.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I agree. I love the eulogy. I love, just it wasn't a very Dylan heavy episode, but I love what we got from him.
Yeah, I mean, and just like the quiet moments with him eating the watermelon herb head, I think were really actually impactful.
Yeah, I agree.
That's the creepiest head though ever. Like,
yeah,
who in the prop department had to carve an herb head?
I hope John Turturro got a bite of that.
I hope so too. Yeah. Okay, so I want to talk about Trojan's horse.
Okay.
So this is the title of the episode, which it's Trojan apostrophe S, so as in it is the Trojan's horse.
Uh-huh.
So this comes from Rickon talking to his wife because she is reading the luminified version of his book. And I actually found what the original phrase was that has been rewritten here.
Okay.
Do you remember it?
No, not verbatim.
So, okay, I had it and I lost it. Hold on. So the luminified version of the quote is, "Your sovereign boss may own the clock that greets you from the wall, but you get to enjoy its ticking and thus should be happy." The original phrase in the original book was, Our job is to taste free air. Your so-called boss may own the clock that taunts you from the wall, but my friends, the hour is yours. So when Devin says, it literally says the exact opposite of what you were saying before. She's just right.
Yeah.
It is the literal opposite of what he was saying before. And his response to that is Trojan's horse. What if it's a Trojan's horse? Which I don't know if that's just a Rickon like legitimately not understanding what the phrase Trojan horse means.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I Rickon is such a weird curveball character in context of a mystery box show in particular, because you're never sure if it's like this is all comic relief or if this is going to all turn out to be like a Darth Jar Jar scenario where it turns out there was deep meaning behind all of this, and in this world it was actually Trojan's horse. No, I don't actually think that's true though. I think it's just Rickon being kind of off. And
I mean, and it perfectly fits his complete misread of the situation, right? Where like, if he thinks what he is doing is putting a Trojan horse in this Lumen book, and yet he's the Trojan, you're fucking yourself, man.
Yeah.
the Trojans are the ones that suffer from the horse, not the other way around. It's wonderful. The thing about this though, like, so I love this plot line because I am confounded by, but also delighted by Rickon simultaneously. I just don't know where this is going. Like, we keep returning to this, so this is going to be a through line in the entire season, it seems like. But to what ultimate end?
Right. So I agree. We're getting tension between him and Devin, which is physically painful to me because for some reason I'm invested in their marriage.
Even though it makes zero sense.
Even though, like almost especially because it makes zero sense. Actually, that's almost kind of what's weird about this episode is they have this marital, disagreement, and it's like my emotional reaction in the moment was like, how can you be fighting about this? Like, surely if this bothers you, then there must be other things about Rickon's existence that bother you because he's so weird. But maybe not. Like, maybe that's the thing, is she's always actually admired his like ethos, even if he's kind of clownish in how he like executes on it.
Yeah, I mean, that quote I read was like cheesy.
Yeah,
but like it wasn't wrong, right? It's
right.
like find your own, like your own sense of ownership in your life.
Yeah.
It's just kind of corny.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you see why Mark S was inspired by it, actually. Despite the fact that, again, it's the presentation is awkward and goofy, but the core of it, I think, is good. But and I think so again, I think she actually does admire that about him. It's one of the things she likes about him. That's one of the reasons she's attracted to him, especially, I think, as we've said before, her being kind of a sarcastic, intrinsically cynical person like her brother. Someone like Rickon appeals to her because he's so earnest, but now he's not being earnest. Now he's lying. He's trying to do a Trojan's horse, and that's repugnant to her because to her that's the opposite of who Rickon is. And Rickon, for his part, has these like flashes of like normalcy where he's like, "What do you want me to say? These people are going to pay me a lot of money, and then we're going to be able to like have that money, and that's going to be good."
Yeah.
Why are you making my life harder?
That does seem like such an anti-Rickon thing to say.
Yeah. He's had a few cracks in his like Rickon persona, which, it's all, that's what makes him such a fun character to watch, where it's like, this is maybe not exactly the right connection I want to make, but it's like, I feel like the character of Hank Schrader in Breaking Bad was like purely like this ridiculous buffoon for like quite a number of episodes, and then it kind of sneaks up on you that it's like, oh, wait a second, he's actually good at his job and he's a badass and he's really brave. It's just that you only get to see that in certain circumstances.
Yeah. No, I like that. I think you're onto something there, because it is interesting. I mean, that is, you talked about this a little already, but the central difficulty I have with this character is he seems so absurd. And we talked about this a few weeks ago that like the world of the severed floor is like by design almost absurdism, right?
Mhm.
And yet sometimes in the world of Severance as a whole, like absurdism is just everywhere. Like the character of Rickon stands out, and this is a bleak, dreary, terrible world that we see above the severed floor, uh, because it's echoing Mark Scout's depression. But then we have this character who feels like he belongs on the severed floor in the Rickon, and that's always been my struggle with him. So maybe where we're taking this character is we're gonna see he's conscious of the fact that he's the punchline, and he's getting sick of it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I agree, actually. I mean, I think I mentioned this exact moment on a previous episode, but I guess I'll mention it again, where Mark says, Mark S is like complimenting his book earnestly, and Rickon in a very like dry, unrickon like tone is like, "Oh, come on, Mark, you don't have to say that. I'm well aware of how I come across to you." And it's a moment when Rickon is under a lot of stress, but it's almost like you're seeing like, oh shit, like you, Rickon's aware of how he comes across to Mark, like
Yeah.
he's aware of how he comes across to anyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, that's more of what it's just what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Anything else you wanted to talk about?
No. Really good episode. I'm
I love it.
as always, like just like counting the hours until I can watch the next one.
Yeah. Apparently, so at the very, the opening of the episode, we see a guy who looks like a dentist walk down the corridor into the elevator at the end of the hallway.
Yeah, and he's whistling
the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald.
Yeah, right.
Which I didn't catch, but apparently was said. And the creators of the show are being coy if that song has any actual meaning. But I think the answer is yes. But I'll let the Reddit sleuths deconstruct that for me. I don't need to do that.
So I'm implicated in this plot because I'd never heard that song before, and then I heard it like the other day before this episode aired by like a week or two for the first time, and was like, oh, that's a cool song, and then it was on this episode. So
so you clocked it on your own. You didn't have to look it up.
I did not have to look it up because I had just listened to it, with attentiveness actually.
Wow.
Because my friend was put it on when we were driving in the car together, and we were enjoying blasting the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald together, and then it was on the show, and I was like, "What is happening?" So yeah.
Hey, has any of your performance reviews ever taken 2 to 6 hours?
I don't think I've ever had a performance review.
I mean, I've had meetings to talk about my end of year like self-assessment because my company has a meeting but it was like it took 30 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, so okay, that is actually interesting to talk about because I think we mentioned before that there's like an office satire aspect to this whole show.
Yes.
And the idea of like taking a guy that you're actually you're entrusting a ton of responsibility in this guy, and you're giving him a ton of power, and you're telling him like, hey, the Mark S situation is the most important thing this company has ever done. By the way, we have absolutely no faith in you, and we think you're a fuck up. And we're going to spend 6 hours verbally abusing you. It's like that's such a perfect like statement about the way like corporate responsibility is managed, where it's like,
yeah,
we want to hold you at arm's length so we can throw you under the bus the minute we have to, but also we're still giving you all the responsibility that we say you don't trust you to handle.
No, you're so right. Maybe that's why I like this episode so much, because I think the corporate life satire returned in a few ways.
Yeah.
I mean the funeral they had, like I loved the dot matrix printer sign. I thought that was perfect. And then yeah, the whole review of him, like the fact one of his negative points is that he put the paper clips on the wrong way on his thing. Like That's just Office Space. Is what that is.
That's I agree. That's like, and it's demeaning. It's demoralizing to be criticized for stuff like that. Like if you've ever been in a situation where someone like, it reminds me of the throwing the coin moment in the movie we just talked about.
Yes.
Where it's like the point of this is nothing other than to demonstrate power and to make it very clear to you that you are a worm. It's not really about the paperclip.
Yep. Totally. But then, there seems to be no consequence. I think you're right. It is kind of the great contradiction, because it's like what Mark S is doing with Safe Harbor or whatever it's called is the most important thing we've ever done. You're doing an absolutely terrible job. Here's all the ways. Now go do it.
Right.
Still.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Like, yeah. The corporate, I want to see their corporate structure diagram,
Yeah.
I want to see what that looks like.
How much
you know,
how much do you think Milchek gets paid?
Not much, I'm gonna guess.
Yeah, I don't expect that the salary is like super high.
The funny thing is, like, I assumed that Miss Cobell like was using Lumen funds to rent the house next to Mark, and that she had another house somewhere. But no, it appears that was just her house.
She just lives there.
She just lives there, which is funny, but also just really interesting.
Very interesting. Yes. All right. That is episode 5 of Severance. Episode 6 is out right now, Matt. We could be watching it, but instead we're talking to each other. So what are we doing? Let's go.
Let's get out of here. Yeah.
All right, folks, that is all we had for you this week. If you have any opinions on The Brutalist or on Severance all the way through episode 5, Trojan's Horse, please feel free to reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com, over on Twitter or Instagram at doofmedia, or on our subreddit, that is reddit.com/r/doofmedia.
That's right. We'd appreciate it if you could subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, YouTube, any of the available podcasting platforms.
Yeah. And if you like what we do here and want to support us, please head on over to our Patreon. You can check us out at patreon.com/doofmedia. And we got book club coming up next week. So there's going to be a vote for the book the week after next. Wait, no, that's it. There will be a vote for the book next week as well. For the following month. So patrons get to vote in that, and also get a bunch of other cool privileges and bonuses and things like that. So check us out at patreon.com/doofmedia.
Yep. Also, please consider rating and reviewing the Doofcast on Apple Podcasts. Each review helps us get more exposure and introduces new people to the content that we make here.
All right, folks. Once again, next week we cover movie number 8 in our Oscars series. It will be the Bob Dylan biopic, A Complete Unknown. We'll see you then.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.